for the City Council meeting of Wednesday, December 4th at 9 a.m. Mr. Winarski, Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Potowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon is absent. Please rise for a moment of silent meditation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. President, I would ask that we remember those in our community who are less fortunate than we are in any and every way. We remember those who have lost loved ones since the last time we were in these chambers. And also I ask our God and Creator to give us the wisdom and the proper information and the courage to make the best decisions for the citizens of the city of Erie. Pledge of Allegiance.
Approval of minutes from the City Council meeting of Wednesday, November 20th, 2019. Bills for payment on 11/29 and 12/6/2019. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Potowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski.
Do we have anybody here this morning in regards to a repository sale? Anybody here this morning in regards to a repository sale? Hearing none, that brings us to citizens to be heard.
Good morning, Council. My name is Randy Barnes, 109 Walton Point, Erie, Pennsylvania. And I wanted to mention to you, and it's not too late, but Eagle's Nest on the east side does a really great job, and they have a financial literacy program. And I'm sure if you would ask, that Council could probably have a special presentation and get some financial literacy. And the reason why I bring that up is, it seems like I continue to see the same thing going to happen that we've seen in the past, and this bond thing. And it wasn't but a year and a half ago, the city refinanced their bonds, like $80 million. So we paid probably close to $1 million worth of fees for the privilege of refinancing our bonds about a year and a half ago. Just keep the city afloat for another year or two. So now the plan is to, not for the city to float some more bonds, but let someone else do it. Let someone else put their name on it and float the bonds, and someone else will pay for it. The problem is that someone else is still the taxpayers in the city, the users of the water authority in the city. But now we include all the users outside the city. They're going to help pay for this mismanagement and the refinancing of bonds for the past 15 years. So we really haven't done anything. We just passed the buck to someone else to make it look like we know what we're doing down here, you know. So we're going to let the water authority finance the bonds. They're going to pay another $1 million worth of fees. So within 2 years, that's $2 million worth of fees the taxpayers have had to pay just to keep the city financed. A couple $1 million thrown away in fees just to keep the city financed, because the $80 million you refinanced and the $90 million that our friends down at the foot of the street are going to finance and give us the money, like co-sign. It's like co-signing for your son. So next year, we won't have the money coming in from the water authority to service the little bit of debt, because you're going to have a little bit of debt left. And next year at this time, you're going to start off $5 million in the hole, because you're going to take $5 million from this bond that our friends down the street are going to float for us, and we're going to plug the hole in the budget this year with $5 million. So next year, the hole still needs plugged. So again, I was down here 10, 11, 12 years ago talking about the King of Bonds. That was back when we could use props to tell stories. We could use pictures and things. And we used to bring in a crown and talk about the King of Bonds, because at that time all we were doing is bonds every year, every 2 or 3 years, bonds to the Senate administration with council approving it. And here's where we are. And yeah, our friends in Philadelphia, they made the recommendations, but they're Gotta remember, they're paid to do a job. They're paid to get you a year or two more, until maybe administration changes, or the state changes, or something changes that makes all our problems disappear. So I appreciate the guys in Philadelphia and that firm being paid $180,000 to come down here and tell you to borrow more money, because that's what you're doing. You're really borrowing more money. You're gonna take 90 million today instead of taking 100 million and 80 million over time. But what you really ought to do, if you really wanna set things right, just sell the damn thing. $350, $400 million instantly into your coffers, sell it, and not have anything to do with it, and let the water department go out and service Northeast, and service some outskirts out past Erie. These people don't want to sign on to the water authority now because Erie is still involved with it. Erie's telling them to borrow $90 million. You think Northeast wants to sign on to the water authority, and in 5 years from now, somehow you tell the water authority, well, borrow another $100 million because we need some money. No, you're restricting what the water authority or the department can do here. But just think about it. You know, we look like real nice people up there. We were going to give you a tax increase, but we're pulling that back. We're just going to increase all these fees. And hey, I think I'm going to end my discussion for today, because I think you know how I feel about borrowing money. You're never going to borrow your way to prosperity. Because if you did all 70, you would go over and borrow $1 million today. And we'd all be fat. You'd all be fat, dumb, and happy. But you can't borrow your way to prosperity. And that's what you're doing. But you're just pushing the can down the road, because a few of you won't be on council in 2 or 3 years. You'll either termed out or you won't be on council. It'll be somebody else's problem. And you'll all look very nice, and you look like this smartest group in the room. Hey, thanks, and have a great holiday.
Well, Jason Brenda, 4131 McClellan Avenue, Erie, PA 16510. I'm going to try and make this a little bit lighter. One thing is, I just want to report that about the Erie, PA's Old Glory, our large 30 by 60 foot American flag that got damaged during Tall Ships Erie. I'm guaranteeing that in 2020, we will have another 30 by 60 foot American flag. The GoFundMe page has brought in over $1,000 from private citizens. And I would like to especially thank Erie Gymnastics Center, Doug and Tina Pershin, for donating $1,500 to the GoFundMe page so we can get another red, white, and blue waving across our city. Positive, good news. Now I'm going to come to the nail biter, the tough decision. I know I've been looking at the budget lately, and I know we're going through the budget sessions, you know, you're having your powwows here and everything, but I think, you know, when Mayor Schemberg keeps talking about how 80% of the budget is pensions, am I like stating that correctly, like pensions and, you know, contracts, you know, one thing is that I think the tough decisions could be this. I see that we have a lot of, you know, different numbers for, you know, police officers, firefighters, staff here. Let's do a cap on our salaries right now, a 5-year cap. No raises, nothing for 5 years. Let's go to a livable wage in 2019 for all first responders. I mean, if you have one firefighter making $65,000, and then another one making $45,000. I know tenure, and you have your labor unions, and then you have all these contracts to deal with. But let's put a freeze, or let's put like a cap on that for right now. And that also goes for the pensions. Let's put like a cap or a freeze on it for like 5 years. You know, weigh the numbers out, because I know that Mayor Schemberg's vision is to release the numbers for the budgets for the next 5 years. And I think if we put something in the budget to say, hey, this is what we could do if we freeze, you know, some of this. I mean, I know there's staff here, and I know a lot of people will say, hey, if it's going to help us pay down the debt, you know, it's tough decisions like this that I know that I have the faith and hope that, you know, the administration and the solicitor and everyone on city council could make. And why I'm saying that is because of, whenever I came here, I talked to you about outdated policies, things that need to be upgraded. You know, thank you for paving McClellan Avenue. You know, my parents' house was built in 1948. There's a sidewalk in front of my parents' house. I do not understand why Northview Heights apartment complex can get away with not putting a sidewalk on their property, even though the apartment complex came after my house was built. And then we have the Kohler property that is grandfathered in. And every time I go up to the engineer's office, I'm getting sick and tired of having the city engineer telling me, oh, it's grandfathered in, it's grandfathered in. You have to bust that grandfather BS so we can have safety in the southeast part of the city of Erie. I mean, it's plain and simple. McClellan Avenue is not finished from 43rd to the city line. And I know I've been emailing everyone. I know I've been talking about becoming a city hall greeter. You know, I'm making my promises to keep my nose clean, stay out of trouble. And I want to apologize to the police force, to council. Again, if I had a problem, I went to Stairways Behavioral Health and I went through the program, and I am on a better tone. My stability is a little bit better. I'm still that Jason that was politically campaigning in the 90s and this millennium. But I find it very offensive, and I don't like the fact that whenever I call the police about a domestic matter, the woman on the phone saying, oh, it makes sense, you know, your family business and your family and everything like that. I do not appreciate the Erie Police Department knowing about my family's business and making fun of me and mocking me on the phone. That is unprofessional, and that woman should be written up. No one should laugh at me. No one. And I know that's the timer, and I think that's a little bit of 5 minutes, but I do have a matrix that I would like to email you about diversity and inclusion. I do not understand why am I getting segregated and left out for all the hard work I've done with the LGBT community while we have LGBT leaders on the LGBT council that practice and preach the golden rule.
Mr. Brandau.
Thank you.
Morning, members of council.
Morning.
My name is Gary Mokris. I've been a homeowner and resident of the city of Erie for what's going on my 13th year. I reside at 503 West Arlington Road in the Glenwood Association, that of which I have been an active board member for the past 6 years, and I'm just starting my second year as president of the Glenwood Association. I'm here before you today in response to a news report I viewed following the last city council meeting, in which 3 women came to you to lobby for change regarding the use of property for short-term rental in the R1 designated zone. Of these women, none of which live in the city of Erie, one of which is a property owner in the city of Erie, and per her testimony in front of the zoning hearing board in October of 2017, she only spends a few weeks a year in Erie. Her own social media profile lists her as a resident of Florida. I'm certain that you were all told a very nice story about how the property owner in question keeps her property well maintained and that all of her clients have never had any problems or complaints. I would certainly agree that the property in question is well maintained and up to City of Erie code standards. I would also agree that most likely her clients enjoy their time in our neighborhood. Simply, and I'm a bit biased here, because it is one of, if not the best neighborhood in the city of Erie. However, what I'm sure she failed to mention are the countless complaints I have received from many of her neighbors who surround her property, and complaints from the neighbors at 2 other short-term rental properties that popped up after her property began taking bookings. I have heard complaints ranging from noise, an entire hockey team filling the streets with cars, strangers wandering into adjacent properties, people urinating in their backyards during a local college homecoming party hosted at one of the properties. There are safety concerns as well amongst our membership, mostly the lack of attention when it comes to checking the Megan's Law registry. I personally assume that risk when I book a room in a hotel or go to a restaurant, but I should not have to assume that risk every week adjacent to my own home. The purchase of a home is one of the largest, if not the largest investment of a person's lifetime. My wife and I had numerous opportunities to purchase in surrounding areas, but chose to live in this city which we love and take our investment in this property, neighborhood, and city very seriously. We are simply asking the city to continue to uphold the zoning law that is in place, which protects R1 neighborhoods and keeps the neighborhood a neighborhood. I come here today with a unanimous vote at our annual meeting of the membership in 2017 to ensure the proper application of the zoning law. Over 80% of our 269 households within our association have paid to support our cause, and every member of the Erie City Zoning Hearing Board has also taken our position, as well as every member of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. I am not against use of property for short-term rental as long as it is within the designated areas throughout our fine city, essentially everywhere except for the R1 designated zone. And I'm hopeful that zoning will continue to uphold these laws. I leave you with words from one of our presidents of our association's past, Spike Spencer, and I quote, "We are associated to protect our investment here in Glenwood. We are associated to ensure that this is a good neighborhood and a suitable place to bring up our children. We are associated for the purpose of being good neighbors, one to the other, and to make Glenwood a happy and desirable place in which we can live and have our being." Thank you for your time.
Good morning. My name is John Bookna. I'm the director of the Erie Downtown Partnership at 140 East 5th Street here in downtown Erie. I'm here representing the more than 300 plus businesses that are in support of the council file number 16138 and the ordinance prohibiting the use of tobacco in recreational areas, parks, and playgrounds, providing penalties. We have plans in place for 2020 and beyond to put more than 100 events in Perry Square that are very family-centric, that are looking to engage people, to connect with coworkers, to connect with people that they live with, that they work with, and that they play with. It's an opportunity for us to put our best foot forward to become that world-class downtown. And part of that is the reality of utilization of our public spaces and our recreational areas. This past summer, we piloted many programs that included reading with children and other young adults, where we had very good engagement with young minds and young future residents of our community, but sitting right next to that were people smoking. And it was sending a message of not welcoming and of an opportunity that says, what are we missing as a community and what are we saying as from a message? So my message today is that we are in support of Council File 16138 to proceed past the first reading. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Ted Ely. I am a resident of Glenwood. I live at 4524 Cherry Street, and I am following up Gary Mokris by talking a bit about the legal issues involved in the Morse property and the proposal that she had before the council. I think you should know that Mrs. Morse litigated a case that was ended in May of this year, whereby, and I do want to back up just a second. I'm not trying to usurp Mr. Ed Betza's representation of council or instruct him in any way. He does a fine job for Erie City Council. I'm sure he knows what we're talking about. But in that case, the matter was referred back to the zoning board, and the zoning board disallowed Mrs. Morse to have a R2 type use in an R1 zoning district. The reason why we're fighting this matter is because of the fact, as Mr. Mokris explained, our neighborhood is a very important enclave, if you will, of people who want R1 type residential family stability. she has appealed the zoning board's decision, and now we're back in court once more before Judge Dimitrovich. It does not look good for her, and I would suggest to you that what she feels she cannot litigate, she will try to legislate, and that is to have Airbnbs and like type short-term rentals in an R1 zone. The reason why she cannot do this is very easy. First of all, the zoning code does not allow transient rentals in an R1 zone. R1 zone is strictly for families and not for rentals. Secondly, it would violate a ruling of the Supreme Court in a case called Slice of Life versus the Hamilton Township Zoning Board, of which I'm sure Mr. Betts is aware. I would just quote from this as to why zoning is important. In the case, the court says, the establishment of residential zoning districts has long been recognized as a valid exercise of municipalities' police power. They serve to insulate areas intended for residential living from increased noise and traffic, protect children living there, and their ability to utilize quiet, open spaces for play and to maintain the residential character of the neighborhood. Non-family uses, including fraternity houses, boarding houses, have been found to be antithetical to the residential character. As more people occupy a given space, more cars continually pass by, more cars are parked, and noise travels through the crowd. A quiet place where yards are wide, people few, and motor vehicles restricted to legitimate guidelines in a land use project address the family needs. This is what we're looking for in Glenwood, what she wants to legislate out of Glenwood. Basically, too, you do not have to pass any legislation for Airbnbs. Sorry.
If you want to wrap it up, you're more than welcome.
Okay, I only have a few seconds here. Airbnbs can be placed in other zoning areas, and that is where they belong, in R2 zoning districts. I would ask that the court follow the wisdom of its counsel and not try and propose a law which would invalidate R1 districts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, council, and absent Mayor Schember, just like absent Joe Sinnott, Mayor. Waking you guys up, Mr. Curtis on your cell phone, and other people, let's wake up. We citizens don't come here to enjoy this experience. I do have some serious complaints. I haven't been here in a while.
Could you
I
please state
live,
your-
Mary Markley, I live at 1020 Cascade Street, Erie, Pennsylvania, in the ghetto. I would like to complain about your poor city services who are all going to be getting raises. The city garbage collectors, workers, you can ask Mr. Mazzala, you can ask Marge in the mayor's office. I've spoken with her. They forget to pick up my leaves that I went out and raked when I was ill with pneumonia. I was out of state for 3 months. I suspended my services. I have let them know I'm back in town. They don't pick up my trash. They don't pick up my garbage. You want to raise the services on senior citizens. We have no garbage. We recycle. We are very good at what we do because we're all in our 80s. Secondly, besides that, the city streetlights on Cascade Street, where I live, have been dim, dark, and I was almost killed there on March 5th of 19 And Mr. Winarski knows that because I had to get my car repaired at his place. Street lights are dim. I've spoken, and nothing's done. I'd like to compliment, though, the workers that do work, but your service workers are not efficient. Secondly, I wanted to ask, and I'm going to be under 5 minutes, I wanted to ask about the nonprofits. Why does the city not secure more funding from the nonprofits? The city is a nonprofit city. I can't afford my taxes. I'm living on Social Security. I've got to go back to work at age 80, which I will do. I have a lot of other concerns, and I don't come here that often because it's futile. And I'd like to get your attention as to what some of the services we need. You all get raises, you have pensions. I worked the city 50 years ago. I had no pensions. I worked for $75 a week take home, and I loved it. I don't have 80, 100, 300,000. You guys are continuous employees, Mr. Kwiatkowski, or not Kwiatkowski, yeah, Kaz. He's one job, 30, 40 years. You all are here a long time. This is a lifetime job for you. Would you please consider the citizens of Erie? We all don't have as much money as you. We are striving and thriving to live on our limited budgets. Secondly, I'd like to say something good. I don't know what I can say good about raising taxes, but I would like some input as to why your representatives, the garbage collectors, whatever they do, they can't pick up the trash. I've made several phone calls, and I like Sal Mazza, or Maz Sala, whatever his name is, but I don't like to talk to him every week. They didn't pick up. They don't clean the streets out there. I know it's the ghetto. 1020 Cascade is the ghetto. It used to be a prominent neighborhood 150 years ago, and I've owned my house there for that length of time. I'd like some input. And also, I would like to see if it's right to know, the public wants to know, the salaries and the pensions and the money that the city is spending and giving to the employees and the executives in the administrative branch. I'd like to see that. That should be public knowledge. It should be published in the paper, the salaries, the pensions, the benefits, everything that you people are getting. And where's the mayor today? Doesn't he come to council meetings anymore? Acknowledged, right? Thank you very much for your time. Have a good holiday. I'll be back.
Thank you.
My name is Roxanne Benson. I live at 747 East 22nd Street. I just want to give a big thanks to the Erie Police Department, first of all, for the more patrols that have been going around in the neighborhood when the Energy Club is open. I've noticed an increased patrol, cars going by quite often. Getting towards the winter time now, things have calmed down. There's been a few oddball things. We did have tire slashed a few weeks ago. Come springtime, it's going to start all over again if something is not done, and places like this are not closed and closed permanently. As we said before, there's industrial sites with empty buildings for rent. Take it out there. They're not going to have parking problems. They're not going to have neighborhood problems. They won't have police problems unless it's caused by them, which is, I mean, that's what they do now. I noticed here you have the ordinance already for the Erie Sewer, or Erie City Water Authority for the money and all that stuff. And that's been, what, less than a month since that's been brought up, maybe a month and a half. Myself, my daughter, my neighbors, neighborhoods have been complaining about this club and others like it since like July. And that's what, 6 months, whatever. I don't know why an ordinance hasn't been in place to not let these places be opened. There's already problems up at 24th and Ash with that one. Numerous calls have been placed up there. Police have, both of these after-hour establishments have been cited several times for what I don't know. Gonna cost you more in overtime come springtime with the police, the problems, everything like that. Neighbors don't know why nothing's not being let out, that what is being done, or what more we can do. The owners, or whatever you might want to call it, of the clubs, they say they're not responsible for what happens outside of their establishment. If that type of establishment wasn't in residential neighborhoods, we wouldn't have nearly the problems. No neighborhood is without any type of problems. The type of problems these clubs, or whatever you want to call them, seem to harbor: the constant yelling, the traffic, the noise, the fights, the gunshots. We don't have that every weekend when these clubs aren't in our neighborhoods. There's trouble, sure. Kids do stuff, adults do stuff. But ours isn't the best neighborhood, but it's also not the worst. It comes and goes. Sometimes it gets bad. Sometimes it stays pretty on an even keel. We're concerned for the safety of our children, our relatives, people live by us, our neighbors. Doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3, 4 blocks away. If they're having problems, it becomes our problem. It should be the city's problem. Fix it. Because if it's not fixed, it's going to get worse. And we're at a standstill. We don't know what else to do. We've been to numerous council meetings. We've talked to Michael Outlaw from the mayor's office. He hasn't been hardly any help at all. Meeting were set up, never showed up, never called, anything like that. We just need an ordinance to prohibit these types of things, clubs, from existing within a residential areas. When somebody gets seriously hurt, shot, killed, whatever, could be 1, could be 2, could be 20. Who knows? It would be a horrible thing for the city to happen to it, and it would be an even more horrible on your conscience that something could have been done to eliminate these, but yet nothing might have been done. Like I said, the ordinance here, a month and a half, wow, it's already up for final passage. We've been complaining for months and months. So everything we've been talking about, anybody that really cares has been in contact with us. Members of council that have contacted us, we appreciate your efforts. We really do. So, and I know it's beating a dog, a dead, however they say it, beating a dead horse. And it just seems like us that nothing's being done. So, in all your good conscience, we don't know how the ordinance are started, but it seems that somebody can start an ordinance because it's right here. For our safety, my neighbor's safety, our property safety, please do something.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. Have any other citizens to be heard this morning? Any other citizens to be heard? Hearing none. Rose?
Ordinances for final passage. Council file number 16136, ordinance number 73, 2019. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Erie, the city determining to incur lease rental debt evidenced by the guaranteed revenue note in the maximum principal amount of $32 million to be authorized and issued by Erie City Water Authority in connection with the construction, alteration, and improvements to the public water distribution facilities in and about the city, including but not limited to the Cherry Street Pump Station and Profi improvement projects, and paying related costs, fees, and expenses, specifying the realistic useful life of the project, authorizing and directing appropriate officers of the city to take certain actions and to execute certain documents, including a guarantee agreement between the city as guarantor and the Erie City Water Authority and the Pennsylvania Infrastructure Investment Authority, and sources of payment of the guarantee agreement, creating a sinking fund in connection with such guarantee obligations, and appointing a sinking fund depository, and providing for the repeal of all inconsistent ordinances or parts of ordinances. By Ms. Schaaf, second by Ms. Allen, that council file ordinance number 16136, and now known as official file ordinance number 73/2019, be finally passed by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council passed official file ordinance number 73/2019 finally by a 6, nay 0. Council File 16137, official ordinance number 74/2019. An ordinance appropriating the sum of $500,000 from unappropriated and anticipated revenue to be received as an ARC Appalachian Regional Commission Power 2019 grant through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This grant will be utilized to purchase the systems necessary to deploy free public Wi-Fi in the city's 8 opportunity zones. By Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski, the council file ordinance bill number 16137, and now known as official file ordinance number 74/2019, be finally passed by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council passed official file ordinance number 74/2019 finally by a 6, nay 0. Ordinances for first reading. Council file number 16134, an ordinance fixing the tax rate for all city purposes for the fiscal year beginning on January 1st, 2020, and ending on December 31st, 2020. By Mr. Winarski, second by Ms. Arrington, the council file ordinance number 16134, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16134 by a 6, nay 0 on first reading. Council file 16135, an ordinance of the City of Erie, County of Erie, and Commonwealth of Pennsylvania adopting the general fund and certain other budgets for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2020, and ending December 31st, 2020. By Mr. Winarski, second by Mrs. Arrington, the council file ordinance number 16135, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16135 by a 6, nay 0 on first reading. Council file 16138, an ordinance of the Erie City Council of the City of Erie, Erie County, Pennsylvania, prohibiting the use of tobacco in recreational areas, parks, and playgrounds, and providing penalties for violations thereof. By Ms. Schaaf, second by Mrs. Arrington, the council file ordinance number 16138, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones.
Mr. President, I am in principle very much in agreement with what we're trying to do. I think this is a part of a larger effort to beautify and to, as we use the term, make our downtown a high-class, healthy, welcoming environment. My only issue is that it's kind of, part timing. You know, I can walk down the sidewalk with 8 kids around me and smoke a cigarette, but I can't walk or sit in a park where there might be a kid running by and smoke a cigarette. Again, I'm not proponent, I mean, it's not the healthiest habit, it's just more about what are we trying to do. as a city, even a downtown. Again, I'm gonna vote for this, but it's just interesting. It picks and chooses in the efforts to make it, all the attention around this is really about downtown, but it affects every park in the city. And how are we really going to do enforcement? We're not really worried about enforcement. Oh, okay, so we just want to make sure that downtown has a certain image. And that's a struggle for me, because this is just one of many pieces of what we're trying to supposedly do to our downtown, which again, I'm not against. But it just seems to be, again, another tool of trying to create something that might not be sustainable, something that might not be real, something that might not meet people's needs. And this is not about meeting people's smoking needs. I'm just saying that I wanted to make a commentary on this in relation to it being a part of a lot of bigger things happening. We haven't gotten in front of us to vote on the banning of the drinking in the parks, but these are all component parts of things. Buildings being bought up and shut down, and certain behaviors or certain things not being allowed downtown is a part of something bigger. And I wanted to kind of make a highlight to that. Individually, it makes sense, but collectively, it starts to do some really interesting things around moving people around and where you can live and what you can do in the spaces that you live in. I'm gonna vote for it because I think it's appropriate on some levels. But it's interesting, again, if we have a downtown event and we're doing a block party in the middle of the street that we shut off, can we smoke there? Or if we have, you know what I mean? So does that change? I don't remember if we switched that or not, you know what I mean? But just little nuances, so. All right, thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Shaw, Mr. Winarski.
I would like to comment on that too, Rose. People understand I am not a smoker, and I actually never was one. My parents were, but it's just one of those things. You're outside. There is a freedom. I'm not 100% sure. I'm confident with this to the extent of we're going to enforce it from the edge of the grass into the park, from the sidewalk, the curb. What's the difference if somebody's walking down the sidewalk in Perry Square smoking and there's kids in a park or anybody in the park? Health-wise, sure, it's got to be healthier than people not smoking than smoking down there, but it's just one of those, is it just something we're putting on a ordinance and really aren't going to push to the extent where enforce? And so I'm voting on it the first reading. I'm not sure I'm going to vote on it for the final passage, but with that being said, there's too many questions on how it's going to be really enforced. It's going to just be enforced at big events that are happening in Perry Square where a police officer may go up to them, hey, there's no smoking in the park under ordinance, or is it 365 days a year? I just too many questions. Principle, yes, I wish there was no smoking at all, but with that being said, I'll vote for it in the first reading, but not sure yet on final passage.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I think it's a start for someone who remembers the days when you could smoke on public conveyances, you could smoke anywhere you wanted, and for lack of a better word, to hell with everybody else. Okay, when you live with someone like I do who has a problem, that's why I wear this blue armband here, because there are people out there that for years couldn't go to some places. And yes, you can smell smoke in a ballpark. I know that's hard to believe. You need only to ask my wife, okay? She can smell it, and a lot of ballparks have gotten rid of it. And really, the answer to your question is, if we want to expand this, we could test it to the constitutional limits. Other towns, cities have done it. Minnesota is one of the states that have made it illegal to smoke in any building where the public attends. They don't even give you the opt-out if you're a social club or if you're a regular club. So I mean, I think it's necessary. I know it looks like we're picking, but I think people today want to have an atmosphere where they can bring their kids, not have to cough to death, not be subjected to smoke and to drinking. There's plenty of places to do it, you know. So I think this is a start. And as for the enforcement, nobody really enforces the laws now. People have learned to, with a little prodding from the public and a little bit of use of police when in the beginning, they have learned to accommodate. You don't see anybody really trying it anymore in a lot of places. So I think it's going to be a learning process, Jim, but I think it's an important step.
Mr. President, I just wanted to chime in on two things. One is to Curtis's point about looking at larger issues here. One of the things I realize as we're talking about this, has taken us a long time to get here, but really kind of thanks to this proposed ordinance, we have started those conversations about, and I've had in the last couple of weeks, even in the caucus session when I talk broadly about the community college, you might say, well, what does that have to do with smoking? But I think we're finally becoming aware of the need for inclusion and to listen to a lot of different voices. So I think oddly enough, this ordinance, when it was first proposed, God, I'm gonna say, sparked those conversations. It really did, and we're gonna accomplish something good here health-wise, we're gonna accomplish something good here environmentally wise. We're gonna learn, it is gonna be a learning process, as Kaz mentioned. I know with those signs up there, I suspect it'll be more self-enforcement, people will become aware of that. And I still say, if there are concerns about enforcement, just look at all the different municipalities and parks and recreation spots that have adopted the young lungs at play in Pennsylvania. So it's amazing to see that a process that started off, you know, kind of where people were at loggerheads, maybe is getting us to a good place beyond smoking. We're really talking now and able to say, let's not kick people out of downtown. Let's see how we treat people who are experiencing homelessness. And I can assure you that I've had good conversations just in the last 3 weeks with movers and shakers who are saying, yeah, we're aware of that. We are going to make sure we communicate that better. So anyhow, I'm voting for it today. I think I already did, and I'll vote for it next time.
Mr. President, if I could, just in continued agreement with what Liz was saying, my only concern is that sometimes that we continue the conversation appropriately. You know, continue it, because sometimes the passing of legislation ends the conversation. So we put, you know, we're gonna pass this probably, a few other things that are gonna come down, and again, individually, it can spark conversation, which I think is, and I agree with you 100%, because it opened up something. I just don't want us to lose, see, because what we're doing is public stuff, right? Passing ordinances, changing policy, but in conjunction to that, there's a lot of private stuff going on that we need to kind of keep our eyes on and keep, and not in a negative way, but just to be aware that none of these things are happening in a vacuum. They're all in conjunction or connection to something larger. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
City Council, we're to adopt council file ordinance number 16138 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. Council file 16139, an ordinance amending the codified ordinance for the City of Erie, Part 1, Administrative Code, Title 7, Employment Provisions, Pension, Article 145, Officers and Employees Retirement System, Section 145.02C, Definitions, Actuarial Equivalent is changed. By Mr. Kwiatkowski, second by Mr. Jones. The council file ordinance number 16139, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City Council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16139 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. Council File 16140, an ordinance amending the codified ordinance for the City of Erie, Part 1, Administrative Code, Title 7, Employment Provisions, Pension, Article 149, Firefighters Pension Plan, subsection 149.01C, definitions, actuarial equivalent is changed. By Ms. Schaaf, seconded by Ms. Allen, the council file ordinance number 16140, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16140 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. Council File 16141, an ordinance amending the codified ordinance for the City of Erie, Part 1, Administrative Code, Title 7, Employment Provisions, Pensions, Article 147, Police Relief and Pension Association, subsection 147.01C, definitions, actuarial equivalent is changed. Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski, the council file ordinance number 16141, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16141 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. Council File 16142, an ordinance amending the codified ordinance for the City of Erie, Part 3, Business Regulation and Taxation Code, Title 5, Act 511 Taxes, Article 371, Earned Income Tax, subsections 371.02A and D, effective January 1st, 2020, by fixing the Earned Income Tax for General Revenue Purposes, Act 32, at 1%, and the Distressed Municipal Pension Recovery Tax, Act 205, at 0.65%, for a total earned income tax rate of 1.65%. By Mr. Kwiatkowski, second by Mr. Jones, the council file ordinance number 16142, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16142 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. Council file number 16143, an ordinance amending the codified ordinance for the City of Erie, Part 9, Streets, Utilities, and Public Services Code, Title 5, Sewers and Water, Article 933, Sewer Rental, subsection 933.02A, by increasing the service charge fee per user. By Mrs. Schaaf, second by Ms. Allen, the council file ordinance number 16143, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Ms. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16143 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. Council file number 16144, an ordinance amending the codified ordinance for the City of Erie, Part 9, Streets, Utilities, and Public Services Code, Title 7, Other Public Services, Article 951, Residential Refuse, subsection 951.09A, by increasing the collection fee per dwelling unit. By Mrs. Schaaf, second by Ms. Allen, the council file ordinance number 16144, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16144 by yeas 6, nays 0 on first reading. That will take us into new business, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move the balance of the agenda, please.
I'll second it, Jim.
Do you have any separations this morning?
All right, moving the balance of the agenda, Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Ms. Schaaf, Mr. Winarski. That'll take us to committee reports, Mr. President. Oh, Mr. President, I'm sorry, there was an item on the agenda under new business, number 5, that was pulled by the sponsor because he's absent today. Okay?
Miss Allen. Give them all that.
Sometimes I can. Committee reports. Kathy Schaaf and I both went to the press conference on Monday where the pop-up store was opened to commemorate Harry Burley. It was a really amazing exhibit. If you haven't had a chance to get there, please do so this week. It was really cool to see, and to also hear Kathy, who is has such an artistic eye and also an interest in the arts, to see her observation of it. There's a big portrait of Harry T. Burley in the shape of a postage stamp that Antonio had done and just did it over the weekend. But there's a timeline of Harry T. Burley's life in Erie, and then really his all the accomplishments he had in New York City, and there's sheet music that's used as a backdrop. So if any of you sing anywhere, you would really like to go in there and see how, you know, Harry T. Burley's influence on the songs that I know that I've sung in the choir that I was in. Anyhow, it's really worth your while to be able to go there and to celebrate a native son of Erie who we had passed a resolution at our last council meeting to acknowledge the first week in December as Harry T. Burley Week in perpetuity in Erie. We had an interesting caucus session with the Erie Regional Chamber, and the consultant who is working with the chamber on business development mentioned Sioux Falls, and that Sioux Falls had just figured out, after a lot of contentious issues, according to him, what they want their community college to be. I thought that was a really interesting news that I wouldn't have known without the caucus session. And the reason I mentioned Sioux Falls is because in James and Deborah Fallow's book on our towns, which has a chapter devoted to Erie, also looks at Sioux Falls and how Sioux Falls is really celebrating and using the skills of new Americans there. So it's just kind of cool to find out that Sioux Falls had also advanced in developing a community college that will meet the needs of all in Sioux Falls. There was a story on the news last night about with the owner of Trocca's Market on 7th and Payne being concerned about badly blighted property adjacent to his business. He said that it's been affecting his business, so there is a blighted property review committee coming up, so I will ask about that particular property there. We weren't sure what the exact address is, but I'll find out and make sure that that's called to the attention of code enforcement. I had some thoughts, and I know some people wonder, you know, why are you looking at your laptop as the meeting is going on? And I always use my laptop as a way to Google stuff that people are talking about. So one of the things I had thought about when, you know, we've had all those questions and concerns about the club, the energy club and rumors. So I started thinking about, are there other types of clubs in Erie that we might be able to model something on? And I looked up Pennsylvania municipalities and social clubs, and Pennsylvania State Police have some interesting, not interesting, they explain, if you're a social club, this is what you have to do. Now, these are social clubs that also have a liquor license, but I was just wondering if they might be adaptable to a social club that says it doesn't serve liquor, in terms of, you know, you have to have a membership list, you have to have an annual meeting, just something I was thinking to try and get us kind of over the hump as to how do we address neighbors' concerns, but also, you know, acknowledge that, you know, where clubs are allowed to exist. I couldn't find anything that would say there might be non-alcoholic clubs. The only one I could find is actually the one by Alcoholics Anonymous on East 6th Street, where obviously you wouldn't have a liquor license there, but that might not be in a residential neighborhood. That's on East 6th, kind of near the Bayfront Parkway. So anyhow, I just wanted to thank the people who called these issues to our attention, and to let you know, when you do bring up interesting issues, I'm trying to find out in real time, how can we respond? So I think that's my entire committee report here. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as regards to Liz mentioning about the Harry T. Burley exhibit, it continues today at 11:30 to 1 p.m. at Blasco Library's Hurt Auditorium. There will be a video chat going on there, and students and teachers can view and hear the music of Harry T. Burley. And there's also an event tomorrow from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Blasco Library Hurt Museum. And December 6th, there will be a viewing between 5 and 5:30. They're going to redo the sign on 6th and French there. So as well as all the events going on at Perry Square with the tree lighting and the gallery night. It's going to be a great night in Erie on Friday night. I helped with the Our West Bayfront Thanksgiving celebration that they had, and it's a very humbling experience, and thankful for all the people involved in providing a wonderful sit-down meal for the people there that they're able to enjoy at the Martin Luther King Center. I attended the Her Home open house on Monday, and what a vision that Jess Nelson had, and completely transformed the place. I went through all of the rooms, and I just am amazed at all the work that was put into the three-quarter house for women that is going to be a wonderful place, and people can donate if they would like at www.herhomerecovery.com. On Saturday, I will be helping with the community outreach group. I have been involved with that in past years. This year they're at the St. Paul Center, 453 West 16th Street, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. this Saturday. They give out free clothing. It's a free clothing distribution drive, and they also provide a luncheon meal, and Santa Claus is there, and toys as well for the children. And again, that's another very humbling experience. So I am so appreciative to all the people in Erie, all of the people, especially those who go unrecognized and, just do it anonymously in the love of their hearts and help out in so many different ways in our city. Gallery night, I'm looking forward to that on Friday night, the lighting up of Perry Square, and I want to go to the Harry T. Burley events as well. So that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Ms. Arrington.
No report.
Mr. Kwiatkowski.
Okay, yes, we met with the Fire Pension Board this week, and they achieved a new all-time high in market value, the highest they've ever had. They continue to do positive things. It's always a challenge. On note, we heard some citizens remarking about pensions. Some of the steps that we did today, the first part of them, will go a long way in correcting something that's been out there for a number of years. But it's always taken political will by the administration and council. So I want to thank my council members who have made these long changes that should have been done many years ago. It's been recommended by myself when I was controller. It was recommended by our actuaries back then. It has taken this long to get it done, but although there'll be some initial pain, long range it'll be for the betterment of the plan. Just want to assure everybody that it's not, there was something said about council members. They do not receive a pension. So please note that they do not, and they haven't, nor has any elected official outside of the mayor of the city of Erie many years ago, I think less than 10, has received a pay increase. So let's make that clear. And if anybody wants to talk to me after the meeting, fine, I'll talk to you. But I don't like misfacts being spread. No member of council gets a pension as a council person, nor have they got a pay increase, along with the treasurer and the controller, in at least 20 or 25 years. And yes, we do push to have pay freezes. And Jason, you need to talk to me. There are things we can and can't do legally. So please give me a call and I'll be glad to discuss it with you. And finally, we did some, I use my phone so nobody thinks that I'm calling anybody. All of our information that the city clerk sends us is either sent to a computer at home, or we get it by mail, or we have it on our phones. That's what you see us using up here. All of the notes, the addendums for the ordinances that we're passing, they're not on that white sheet. They're in here so that I can read them item by item when I have a little problem. I read them the night before a meeting, I read them during the meeting, and then sometimes I even read them after. So we're not showing disrespect, so please don't show us any disrespect. We're not making phone calls. Our business is on these phones, and a lot of it, all of our city businesses. Finally, I'd just like to say that we made a lot of votes today on a lot of ordinances, but nothing is written in stone. These are the first readings. Council has not made any decisions, and until we get a consensus amongst us, any number of these items can change, no matter what you read in the paper or heard on the media. There is nothing. This bond issue with the water department, that was being floated whether we take the 90 million or not. So just so you understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cass. Mr. Jones.
No report, Mr. President.
I actually have no report. We still have our work to do on our budget. Like Cass says, we did vote first reading on a number of items that have to do with the budget, but we still have our work cut out for us to the extent that still need some questions to be answered, some different scenarios, what ramifications that we would have if we were to agree with any $90 million agreement with the Water Authority. But at this point, we still have a lot of work to do, and I appreciate everybody's patience We want to do it right. That's all there is to it. We got to do it right. With that, we'll go to our city controller. Board. Lamus?
Good morning. I just have a few things. One, I wanted to clarify, with the city council meetings, of course, the mayor is not required to attend. He chooses to have representation at the meetings. In order to cover those, we have an agreement that, as his chief of staff, I attend the meeting on Wednesday mornings, the first Wednesday of the month, and on the third Wednesday of the month, the mayor attends the evening meeting. Also, in terms of the budget and all the salaries and pensions, that is public information. That's all posted on the City of Erie's website. The entire budget book is there for anybody to look at. And Ms. Markley, in terms of your leaves, we thought those had been taken care of. I've communicated on my phone with Moz and Margie this morning, and they are sending the crews back out. We thought that had been taken care of, and we apologize for that. In terms of the Tracas Market, that property that was referred to on the news last evening, there are 10 citations and 8 quality of life tickets on that right now. Our code enforcement office has been trying to get some remedy there. I got a text from Dave Mulvihill, who's watching in his office. And we will follow next steps with that, and I think that's a good idea to bring it up at the Blighted Property Review meeting as well.
Will be going before like a district justice?
I think that would be the next step.
I think that would be really helpful to know if that happens and when it happens, and then we could get people to attend, because one of the,
yes,
I didn't mean to interrupt, but sometimes what happens is you go before the district justice, I've been told, and then there's like, okay, we're gonna give you this much time, but I think it would be helpful
Right.
to know. So if you can keep me in the loop on that too, Renee, that would
You
be
bet.
really helpful. Thank you.
Yep. And then just 2 other things. Just wanted to, again, comment on Downtown Delights, of course, is this Friday. The festivities start at 5 o'clock. The Holiday Village shops will open. There will be several vendors in those shops. We'll have specifics at the press conference tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. About 5:45, Santa and the mayor will depart up State Street and arrive in Perry Square for the lighting, which will occur at about 6 o'clock. And then the festivities will continue, of course, over at the Boston store with Santa. And finally, we have our ZEBO delegation returning next week. We've been, the plans have changed several times, but we think we finally have the schedule set. We anticipate that at the signing ceremony next Thursday, we will have agreements signed between the ZEBO hospitals and schools and UPMC, Hammett, AHN, St. Vincent, Mercyhurst Preparatory School, LECOM, and potentially Edinburgh University. So we look forward to that. We've been hard at work on that as well. Thank you.
Renee, I'm gonna bug you again. How many citations have been,
10 citations and 8 quality of life tickets.
so how many citations does it take before it goes to a district justice? I mean,
It's probably.
one.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So, with that being said, I'd like to see this one expedited
Right.
just a little bit because it's, thank you. Mr. Betza?
I have nothing except I'll just pick up on your last comment just to address, when a citation is issued, it goes to the district justice. The quality of life ticket does not. So that would be 10 matters based on what we've just heard. That would be 10 matters that would be referred directly to the district justice.
And then where's it go from there, since there's already been 10 and just no response whatsoever from the property owner, or?
Well, when a citation, I don't know. I mean, this is the first I'm hearing of the issue and that citations were issued. But when a citation would get issued, the matter would be referred to the district justice. The individual would have the ability to plead guilty or plead not guilty. If they plead not guilty and identify with the district justice that they intend to defend the matter would be scheduled for a hearing before the district justice. The judge would then make the decision after a hearing. I don't know if a hearing's been held. I'm just telling you the process. I'm not familiar with the specifics in this case, but I certainly can look into it.
Mr. Betza, if we get a hearing a result we don't agree with, Can we appeal that over the district justice?
Maybe.
Well, I know legal, we have some abilities.
Typically, there are appeal rights. It depends on what the issue is. If it's a civil matter, absolutely. If it's a criminal matter, there may or may not be.
No, I'm referring to like, I've been to a lot of these hearings, and they tend to die their own death. And they sit there and they become ignored. And, you know, like, what is the famous building on 12th and Bayfront Highway? The gentleman's been slapped how many times? He's been ordered almost to go to jail, yet nothing happened. So I'm saying, if we are not happy with the district justice on that civil matter, we can't go above, right?
There are appeal rights. Each case, depending on what the issue is a little bit different, but there are appeal rights from a district justice hearing, correct?
Because sometimes we don't seem, even with the system in place, we're not getting the required results that we should be getting. You know, we got things that have existed for 5 and 10 years. And the public looks at us and they think we're doing nothing. When in fact, you know, everybody's going like this, you know.
Right.
So,
Can I just chime in there? I think that, again, not specific to this case, but we met with Kathy Rosdick, and she, I mean, all the things, she actually said to me, all the things you yell about, Liz, at the Blighted Property Review Committee in terms of collecting data. And I know people want to say, well, what about action after collecting data? But I thought it was very encouraging that there is data being produced now as to what the property conditions are, and that I think the way Kathy explained it, and Renee, maybe you might do a better job, is that, you know, that data will drive policy decisions and action. So now that we know, and we also are gonna know which properties are vacant, we're gonna know if they are, like what type of ownership there is that correct? So, in terms of being able to say, here's a, you know, a property owner with a bunch of violations, I don't know, it just was very encouraging to me that, we're getting there, and I think it's gonna accelerate now that it's an action plan for, specifically for the East Bayfront area, but it's gonna be able to be replicated. And I think Trocas would be outside of that, am I correct? Because Trocas is at 7th and Payne, and I think that the Bayfront neighborhood goes to East Avenue, I think, and so Payne is a little bit east of there, but still. Those are all good questions though, Kaz, because it's what comes up at Blighted Property Review Committee. It's like, okay, so how long have these things been hanging there? You know?
and I don't want to see businesses leave because we don't do anything.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I believe that's it, council. Let's go do our other job, budget.
City Council adjourns at 10:30. Mr. Winarski, Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Shaw.